I suggested an open marriage after cheating on my husband with a coworker. He discovered everything and took revenge in a cold and brutal way, reducing me to nothing. Matteo is 43 years old and works as a university professor of mechanical engineering. He has always been a methodical, calm man with a soft voice and a discreet sense of humor that only those closest to him knew how to notice. I am Clara, 41 years old, a systems analyst at a multinational company, and for a long time I thought our relationship was solid. We built a comfortable life, we bought a house with a garden, we raised Santiago with much love and companionship. But when he went to study abroad, something inside me broke down. The silence in the house made me reflect more than I would like. I began to see clearly a disconnection that I had previously refused to admit. That Saturday night, the smell of the lasagna still in the oven seemed ironic, as if the warmth of that food contrasted cruelly with the coldness that lived between us. The table was set, the wine glasses almost untouched, and a silence that tortured me. I looked at Matteo and saw a loyal partner, a dedicated father, but no longer a lover or someone who awakened desire. I did not know where to start, but I needed to be honest. I spoke calmly, although inside my heart was beating as if it were about to burst. I told him that I felt empty, as if we were only sharing a space, but no longer a real life. Matteo opened his eyes as if he had received an invisible slap. He was not a man of big reactions, but the impact was evident. He put the fork down on the plate, crossed his arms, and stared at me, trying to absorb everything I was saying. "Are you saying you want to separate?" he asked with a choked voice. I shook my head. It was not about a separation, it was about trying to understand what we were missing. I explained that I did not want to throw everything away, but that something had to change. It was as if our story had gone into a coma after our son left the scene, and, suddenly, I realized how much we had forgotten what it was to be a couple. As difficult as it was, Matteo remained willing to listen. He asked questions calmly, but each one was like a sharp knife. "Are you unhappy with me? For how long have you felt this way? Did I do something to hurt you?" I tried to answer without causing more pain, but the truth hurt, even when said carefully. I told him that it was not about something he had done, but about what we had stopped doing. The deep conversations, the spontaneous plans, the laughter for no reason, everything had evaporated. We became too adult, too organized, too functional, and life on autopilot devoured us. The feeling was like tearing down a castle built with great effort, stone by stone. I did not want him to feel guilty, but I knew he would because, deep down, Matteo always carried the weight of being the reliable man, and now he was hearing from his wife that that reliability was no longer enough. It was a tough conversation, without shouting, but with a tension that made the air heavy as lead. Outside, the night was warm, but inside the living room, I felt cold, a kind of emptiness that chilled me from within. I knew something would change after that conversation, I just did not imagine what or how. Matteo looked at me with a mixture of confusion and pain. He said that he also felt lonely at times, but he did not know how to express it. He said that he tried to maintain the routine, the work, the care of the house as a way to keep everything working, but he acknowledged that perhaps that had distanced us even more. At the end of the dinner, he took my hand, as if trying to hold on to something that was still left. There was love there, but a tired love, covered in dust, almost unrecognizable. And it was in that void, between what we were and what we had become, where, without knowing it, I planted the seed of everything that would come next. It is strange to say it out loud, or to write it in this case, but I honestly did not remember the last time I had had an orgasm with Matteo. It was not just the sex, it was everything. The touch, the kiss on the neck upon waking, the caresses on the sofa, the brushing of legs under the blanket. Everything had vanished, like a tide that recedes without warning. For months, he tried. He would try to hug me when I got out of the shower. He would give me back massages when I complained of pain, but I always made some excuse. I was tired, I had a headache, or I would simply turn over. Deep down, I no longer felt desire. I remember one night when he approached me, all tender, wrapping his arms around my waist. He kissed my neck, he whispered that he missed me, and I, coldly, simply told him that I wanted to sleep early because I had a deadline at work. The worst part is that it was not a lie, but it was not just that either. There was no longer any desire. And when that is lost, it is like living next to a stranger. The bed became a neutral field. We slept together but distant, each one in their corner, as if we were sharing a hotel room on a business trip. The silence between us became deafening. At night, we heard the same sounds, the ticking of the clock, the cars passing on the street, the creak of the mattress when one of us turned over, but we no longer listened to each other. And it is difficult to describe the feeling of lying next to someone who was once your world and is now just part of the furniture. Matteo never pressured me, he was never aggressive or even insistent, but his gaze said it all. You could see the frustration hidden behind the patience, and in some way, that hurt more. It was as if he had died inside and did not want to admit it. I felt guilty for not desiring my own husband, but I also felt suffocated by the expectation of having to desire him. There were days when I would look at myself in the mirror and think if the problem was me. Had I lost my libido? Was I depressed without knowing it? But it was enough to hear a different voice at work, an innocent compliment, for something to light up inside me. Then I understood that it was not about me, it was about us, about how our desire had become routine, about how predictability killed the mystery. I think what hurt me the most was realizing that I had become a woman who rejects her own partner and then wonders why she feels invisible. It was cruel, because I myself built that abyss between us, and no matter how much Matteo tried to cross it, I kept moving the bridge away. And that is when I began to think that maybe the answer was not in him, but in something new, outside of there, an external stimulus, a different emotion, something that would make me feel alive again. And that idea, which at first was just a whisper, began to get louder and louder. Only at that moment, I still could not imagine that everything I thought I had under control was about to get completely out of my hands. We were trapped in a routine that disguised a deep crisis, and I knew that if I did not do something, the next step would be separation or something even more painful. It was then that the seed planted at that dinner truly began to germinate, and when I decided to open my heart again, it was not to talk about resentments, it was to propose something that to me seemed like the only solution, even if it ended everything at once. It was not easy to gather the courage to say that. I sat down with Matteo a week after that difficult conversation during dinner and asked him to listen to me without interrupting. I told him that I had thought a lot, read things, watched videos, and that I was trying to find a way to rescue our connection, not to destroy it. The idea seemed absurd even to me at first, but over time it began to make sense. I did not want to cheat on him or betray him in secret. I wanted to propose something transparent, conscious, with rules. Suggesting that we open the marriage was, in my head, an act of trust. I explained that it was not about meaningless casual sex, but about experiences that would allow me to feel again what had vanished between us. That tingling in the stomach, the anxiety before a date, the desire to be desired. I told him that by living those emotions outside, maybe I would return to him with more desire, with more dedication, with more intensity. That I could rediscover the woman he first met, before marriage, before motherhood, before spreadsheets and responsibilities. For me, that was a way of growing, of maturing. It was not destruction, it was a restart. Matteo looked at me as if I had lost my mind. He never raised his voice, but the silence between one sentence and another of what I was saying roared. He told me that he never imagined hearing something like that from me. He asked if I was in love with someone. I denied it. I told him it was not about loving another person, but about rescuing myself. And still, I saw in his eyes what I feared most: disappointment, disbelief, almost revulsion. It was as if I had committed a betrayal even without having done anything concrete. And maybe, in a way, I already had. Still, I maintained a calm posture. I stressed that everything would be done with his consent, without lies, without hidden deceptions, just mutual freedom and control over our own desires. I even suggested that he could also go out with other women if he so wished. But when those words came out of my mouth, I realized that I was not prepared to hear a yes from him. The truth is that, although I believed myself to be modern and conscious, I wanted something that was just mine, that would free me without necessarily opening the same doors for him. Selfish, perhaps, but at least honest. Matteo took a deep breath, was silent for a few minutes, and then stood up. He said he needed time to think. And as he left the room, I realized that maybe I had gone too far. But part of me still believed that it could work. I had already read stories of couples who saved their marriages this way, who rekindled their passion by allowing themselves to live other experiences. The problem is that I ignored an essential detail. Every relationship has its own invisible rules, and by trying to change ours, I was breaking a pact that maybe even I did not know how sacred it was for him. But what I did not perceive at that moment was that what I saw as evolution, Matteo interpreted as an emotional betrayal. And that by taking that step, even with honesty, I had touched something much deeper than sex. It was about exclusivity, respect, values. It was about who we were to each other and, deep down, who I was becoming myself. His answer would come days later, and it would not be gentle at all. Matteo was never an impulsive man, but when he came back for us to talk, he seemed like another person. His calm gaze had disappeared. He observed me as one looks at a traitor, at a stranger. He sat in front of me without raising his voice. He did something worse. He used logic, as he had always done in his years in the classroom. He said that if what I wanted was simply to experience something physical, he would solve it with money. Do you want new sex? We hire one, too, however many times you want, without attachments, without drama, just the part you say you are missing. It was like a punch to the stomach. At that moment, I felt insulted. That seemed rude, vulgar to me. But he was just giving me back what I myself had proposed, a relationship without exclusivity. And then, when he threw that proposal at me with such coldness, I heard myself say, "But that is not what I want." It was in that instant that it hit me. I was not just looking for a different body. What I wanted was to be courted, desired, looked at with wonder. I wanted to feel that adrenaline again, the tingling in my stomach, the gaze full of promises. I wanted what no longer existed between us. I wanted to feel alive. And suddenly, I realized that I was trying to fill a void that had nothing to do with sex. It had to do with connection, with novelty, with emotion. Matteo understood it before I did, and his expression made it clear that this was even worse than a physical betrayal. You want someone who looks at you as if they were seeing you for the first time. And if that someone is not me, Clara, then we have been dead for a long time, he said. And I did not know what to answer because, deep down, he was right. I was looking outside for something I no longer had the courage to ask for inside the house. Matteo told me that at that moment he understood that the proposal was not an attempt to save the marriage. It was a sign that I was already emotionally in another place. He spoke with so much pain in his eyes that I felt like crying. And I cried. Not out of regret, but from realizing how much my coldness had hurt him, how much he felt replaced, substituted by a fantasy he could not even comprehend. Because for him, love was commitment, and for me, at that moment, love was mixed with a desire for freedom. And maybe that was irreconcilable. He said he saw me as someone who already had a plan, that only the authorization was missing to put it in motion. Are you asking for my permission to betray me with a clear conscience? Do you not realize, he asked me calmly, but with a silent rage that burned. I wanted to scream that it was not like that I still loved him, that I wanted to save what was left, but the only thing that came out of my mouth was always the same. I just wanted to try something new. And he listened to it as one who hears a death sentence. The distance between us that night became an irreversible abyss. And it was there, with the logic of an engineer and the coldness of a wounded man, that Matteo completely dismantled all my justification. He exposed that it was not about rescuing anything, but about escaping. And by doing so, he forced me to see that perhaps I was already emotionally committed to another idea, to another person. Because only someone very sure of where they are or who they want is capable of proposing such an agreement without fear of losing everything. And that night, I realized that there was already a name that had been on my mind too often to be a simple coincidence. It was at that point in the discussion, with Matteo still looking at me as if trying to understand who I was, that the guilt overflowed. I simply could no longer maintain the lie of neutrality. The idea of opening the marriage did not come out of nowhere. It had a name, it had a face, and that face was Diego. He was a marketing consultant for our company and was involved in the digital restructuring project. A charismatic guy with a presence that dominated any room. Always very polite, helpful, with that air of someone who seems to understand everything about you with just one look. He was subtle but direct. At first, it was just lunches with the team, jokes here and there. But over time, he began to provoke me more directly. He would comment on my perfume. He would say that he liked my energy, that he found it incredible how I balanced career and personal life. He would say that my husband must be a lucky man. I would laugh, thinking it was all harmless. Until I started to look forward to those interactions. I found myself choosing my clothes based on the days Diego would be at the headquarters. It was a silent, dangerous, and absurdly exciting game. And I felt alive, desired, relevant, things I had not felt at home for a long time. The conversation took a different turn when we were alone in the meeting room after a workshop. Diego said that he admired couples who allowed themselves to live new experiences, that love did not have to be chained to exclusivity, that many times opening the relationship saved marriages. He used examples of friends, stories from books, articles from modern magazines. He spoke like someone who had studied the subject. And I, vulnerable, wanting to believe that there was something beyond the monotony that consumed me, let myself be carried away. I began to think that he was right, that maybe the problem was the outdated model of a relationship in which I was trapped. We never touched, there were never kisses or caresses, but the flirting was constant and more dangerous for being contained. Because it was emotional. And that type of betrayal is even harder to recognize and to forgive. When I found myself defending the idea of an open marriage with Matteo, it was inevitable to recognize that Diego already occupied a space in my mind, a space that was previously only Matteo's. And by admitting it out loud, I realized how much I had allowed fantasy to contaminate my vision of reality, how much the illusion of a new world had blinded me to what I could still save. Matteo listened to my story without interrupting. He just looked at the floor with his fists clenched and his jaw tense. When I looked up and said, "It was just conversation," he replied with a coldness that cut through me like a razor. But it was with intention. And he was right. Diego may have never touched me, but I opened up to him in a way I had not done with my husband for a long time. I told him my fears, my frustrations, my desires. He encouraged me to get out of my comfort zone, as if doing a favor. But deep down, he was carving out space in an already fragile marriage, and I allowed it. By confessing this to Matteo, I thought I would feel some relief, but what came was the opposite. The tension between us increased. Now, he no longer saw just a dissatisfied woman. He saw a woman manipulated by another man, someone who flirted with betrayal and used the discourse of evolution to justify her escape. The image of Diego began to occupy all the spaces in our house, in our dialogues, in the questions that were not asked but floated in the air. And without knowing it, by revealing everything, I had put Matteo on alert, an alert that would lead him to do something I never imagined. Matteo was always rational. When he suffers, he does not scream, he does not break things. He investigates. And that is exactly what he did after my partial confession about Diego. While I believed he was just digesting the pain in silence, he was actually gathering information with the coldness of an experienced detective. He found Diego's LinkedIn, he dug into his social networks, he cross-referenced names, he checked tagged profiles. In a short time, he discovered a truth that even I did not know. Diego was married to Daniela, a nutritionist, and was the father of 2 young girls, Isabella and Laura. And what impacted Matteo the most was the contrast, the perfect family displayed on social media, in recent photos, smiling at a children's dance festival. It was that night, with a printed folder in his hands, when Matteo cornered me. We sat at the kitchen table, and he began to speak, slow, direct, painful. He showed me the photos. He pointed out the smiles, the posts of love, the comments full of pride. You got involved with a man who takes his daughters to dance on Sunday and tells you on Monday that his wife is absent. Look at this, Clara. Look at it well. I could not hold his gaze. I felt dirty, stupid, a toy in the hands of a charismatic liar. But Matteo wanted more than shame. He wanted the truth, all of it. Was it just conversation? He asked me with a firm voice. I tried to maintain control. I tried to contain the disaster where it was. But it was no longer possible. The lie stuck in my throat like acid. And there, pressed between his file and the silence of my own conscience, I confessed. I said yes, that I had slept with Diego. Not once, but several times. And each word that came out of my mouth seemed to kill a part of me. Matteo remained motionless. Only his eyes turned red, fixed on me, as if he were watching the destruction of his own identity in slow motion. I began to explain. I said that the first times were fast, impulsive, almost mechanical, oral sex inside Diego's car, in the company parking lot, right after lunch. The heat still in the body, the fogged-up windows, the adrenaline that someone might pass by and see us. There were 2 encounters like that. And then, the motels came. One in particular, near the highway, with automatic check-in. We would meet there once or twice a week, during work breaks. It was at least 10 times in the last 3 months, a pattern or ritual. And while I was saying all that, I felt more and more distant from the woman I once was. Matteo did not react. His silence was worse than any scream. He just stepped back, leaned against the wall, and ran his hands over his face, as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. So, you were already cheating when you asked to open the marriage, he asked. And that time, his voice broke. I told him yes, but that I regretted having lied, that everything started as an emotional game, a lack that blinded me, and that when I realized it, I was already crossing lines I swore I would never cross. But for him, that was a detail. It was as if I had planned everything. And maybe he was right. The cruelest part was that, even after everything, even with my soul bare before him, a part of me still felt that I had also been deceived by Diego, by that beautiful discourse of freedom, of evolution, of modern relationships. He painted me a world where I would be valued, free, intense. But behind every caress in the motel, there was a lie about the life he claimed not to have. And I believed it. I believed it while destroying my marriage. He continued to take pictures with his family in the park and give his daughters goodnight kisses. And I, believing myself to be modern, evolved, liberating. Matteo said nothing more that night. He took the folder, locked himself in the office, and left me alone with the bitter taste of my own truth. His pain was now cold, calculated. And that terrified me more than any explosive reaction. I knew he was not just going to accept what happened, that he was not just going to leave. He was organizing something, a plan, a response to match. And from everything I knew about him, I was sure Diego would also pay with interest. Consequence. The call happened on a Tuesday shortly before lunch. Matteo did not warn me. He simply took the cell phone, called Diego from the corporate number, and activated the speakerphone. I was in the next room, and I heard everything. Matteo's voice was serene, but with a venomous tone that slid into each syllable. Good afternoon, Diego. Clara's husband here. Do you remember me? The silence on the other end of the phone betrayed the panic. Matteo did not give time for any reaction. He began to describe with surgical precision every detail of the betrayals, the days, the times, even the name of the motel. Diego only asked for calm, but it was too late. Matteo was not interested in explanations. He wanted humiliation. He said that since Diego seemed so interested in my company, he himself might get to know his wife, Daniela, better. After all, since we are all so modern, maybe she also wants to try something new, do you not think? It was cruel, cold, intentionally venomous. Diego stammered, tried to negotiate, pleaded for silence. But Matteo did not want to converse. He said that the minimum acceptable was Diego's immediate departure from the project and, furthermore, that he should never, under any circumstances, speak to me again. No glances, no greetings. That same week, Diego requested his voluntary resignation. They said it was for personal reasons, but everyone knew something was not right. The atmosphere in the office became strange, heavy. Colleagues whispered, but no one was certain of what had happened. Only I knew the magnitude of the tragedy behind Diego's nervous eyes. And then, the final blow came. Someone, Matteo never admitted it, but I know it was him, sent an anonymous email to Daniela with attachments, screenshots of the conversations, dates, entry and exit records at hotels near the company, everything documented. I found out through a colleague from Human Resources, a friend of Diego's wife, that Daniela collapsed upon learning. They say she had a panic attack in front of the girls, threw her cell phone out the window, and kicked him out of the house that same night. The girls were in their room and heard everything. The announcement of the separation came the following week and, according to rumors, Daniela even took the case to a lawyer because part of the infidelities occurred during work hours, with risk to the company's reputation. The sandcastle that Diego had built collapsed violently and publicly. Meanwhile, I was sinking. I was temporarily removed from the company under the pretext of emotional instability, but everyone knew. The glances in the hallway said it all. Some colleagues distanced themselves completely, others feigned normality, but I felt the silent judgment everywhere. The messages disappeared, the invitations for coffee too. Suddenly, I became the woman who almost destroyed the team. The competent professional became the protagonist of an internal scandal. And Diego disappeared. He left the project group, he blocked everyone, and he started working remotely, like a ghost of what he was. And even with all this, what hurt the most was seeing Matteo so calm, so in control. He had won. He had done justice with his own hands. Diego was exposed, ridiculed, set aside. But I knew, and he knew too, that the story was not over yet. The feeling was that something more was coming, that his calmness was just the beginning, a dark omen of what he still planned to do. And as I would learn very soon, he was not even close to being finished. Matteo did not kick me out. He did not pack his bags. He did something worse. He took absolute control of our life. He said that if I wanted to continue in this marriage, I would have to accept the new rules, without questioning them, without discussion. The first of them: cut any tie with Diego. Block, delete, erase everything, even contacts of colleagues who could serve as a bridge. Either you close that door with cement, or I am walking out of it right now, he said, looking at me with the coldness of someone who has already made a decision. I felt fear. For the first time, it was not me who was proposing, it was he who was imposing. And I accepted. The second demand came with the same coldness: 15 days of vacation, without contact with the outside world. You need to disappear, and I need to see if I can breathe with you nearby. He did not ask, he ordered. And I saw myself, like never before, in a position of emotional submission. I was forced to send an email to the Human Resources Department requesting an immediate leave, citing mental health problems. A lie, partly. I was on the verge of collapse, but not for the reasons others imagined. For the first time, my life was in Matteo's hands. And he was not being kind. During those 15 days, he imposed a subtle but effective isolation. No social media, no calls with colleagues, not even with friends. Only family, and even then under supervision. The days passed slowly, and I began to understand what he was doing. Matteo was rebuilding the relationship, but in his own way. Now he was the owner of the narrative. I was the guilty one, trying to be forgiven. The balance of power had completely inverted. The woman who once asked for freedom now begged for redemption. And Matteo knew it and used it. In the rare moments when he spoke to me, his words were always calculated. There was no longer a we. It was him and then, maybe, me. The tone was that of an owner, a boss. And as painful as it was, I could not react because, deep down, I felt indebted. And he knew it. He used my guilt as a key to lock up my desires. I believed that by submitting, I could save the marriage. But with each passing day, I understood that what they were doing there was not reconciliation, it was domination, a prolonged punishment, disguised as a second chance. I returned from those vacations as one returns from an emotional exile. The house seemed the same, but the codes had changed. Matteo had established a routine with clear rules, schedules, total transparency with the cell phone, location activated, call history visible. He said it was not surveillance, it was rebuilding trust. But it was. And I knew it, I just did not have the strength to oppose it. He told me where I should be, with whom, and how I should behave. And most terrifyingly, I obeyed. Like someone who wants to pay an unpayable debt, like someone who hopes, perhaps, to be accepted again someday. And even with all that, even with that emotional prison disguised as reconciliation, I kept trying to believe that maybe this was temporary, that he just needed time to heal, to forgive. But deep down, something in me knew that Matteo had liked this new role, being the wounded man who became the master of his own pain. And that he had no intention of letting go of that control anytime soon. The calm was over, and what came now was a kind of perverse, controlled peace, where I breathed but with permission. When I thought the worst was over, Diego's exposure, the humiliation at work, the forced isolation, Matteo proved that he still had cards up his sleeve. He did not just want me to suffer, he wanted everyone to know what I had done. One morning, I woke up with my cell phone vibrating nonstop. Messages from my mother, from my 2 brothers, aunts, cousins, all shocked, perplexed. Matteo had sent a mass message explaining his version of the events. He said I was seduced by a married colleague, that I had secret encounters during work hours, that I risked our marriage for sex and vanity. Along with the text, he attached screenshots, my conversations with Diego, messages with suggestive emojis, locations of motels, and brief audios. It was not just exposure, it was public destruction. My mother, ashamed, cried without understanding how her daughter, the most proper in the family, had become the protagonist of a scandal. My brothers did not answer me for days. At work, there was no longer an atmosphere to return to. Human resources recommended a discreet exit, and I accepted. There was no way to continue. I became a name whispered in the hallways, a symbol of shame. At home, things only got worse. Matteo imposed a new set of rules. All my movements had to be communicated, my phone handed over before sleeping, without passwords, without privacy. He said that if I had chosen to live like an easy woman, now I would have to prove that I could be trustworthy again. His words hurt more than any physical punishment, but I accepted. I swallowed it. I cried in the shower and smiled in the living room because I still believed that this was the price to repair what I did. I saw no way out. I only saw guilt. And guilt is a chain too heavy to break. The night after the exposure, I thought he would leave the house, that he would sleep in another room, that he would leave me in the silence of contempt. But no. Matteo entered the bedroom, locked the door, and looked at me like a wounded animal about to attack. He said that since I liked to be used, he could do it too. And he took me. He turned me over, he took off my blouse, and he had sex with me with an intensity one could barely stand, with desire and dominance. No affection. It was a possession, an intense act of dominance. And I allowed it. I accepted it. I consented. Out of rage towards myself, out of guilt, out of cowardice. But I consented to everything from beginning to end. In the end, he whispered in my ear that now I was only his, that no other man would ever touch me, that I would pay every day for what I did. And since then, that is exactly what he has done. He watches me, he controls me, and he takes revenge with cold caresses, with harsh words, with calculated silences. He still sleeps with me, he still kisses me, but as one who punishes, as one who marks territory. I no longer know where the punishment ends and the addiction begins. I no longer know if I am paying for something real or if I have become a hostage in a game that he does not want to end. Today, I live surrounded by medications, appointments with psychologists and psychiatrists. I had to start trauma therapy because my body trembles when I hear the key turn in the bedroom door. My self-esteem died, my sexuality became a field of guilt. I look at myself in the mirror and I no longer see Clara. I only see someone who destroyed her own home, fell into an emotional trap, and now pays with interest and penalties for every misstep. I do not know if I deserve forgiveness. I do not know if I deserve compassion. I only know that I deserve every consequence and that now, although I am still alive, I carry scars that will never disappear.